Hello everybody, welcome to Planet SkyFF, the world where everything revolves around £50,000. My name's Suj.
And my name is James.
I was thinking yesterday, before we were recording this pod, but the game hasn't opened yet.
Friday.
So we don't know the rules.
Look, here's what we'll do, right? This is an introduction to Sky
Fantasy football
for generally new players. If you're an experienced player, there's probably not too much you're going to pick up on this one. By all means, come back next week or just listen just for shits and giggles if you want anyway.
Yep.
But from what I've heard from a few people, we're not expecting any major rule changes. Like, it's not going to be... This isn't going to be something we're recording next week. It's like, put that in the bin. No. There might be one or two things that are a little bit different.
I'm not sure. They haven't confirmed the overhauls. That's the only thing.
No.
Or the number of transfers?
No.
So those are the two kind of big things that we don't know. Everything else, I think, will be...
There might be little quirks to the scoring. Like, maybe if your goalkeeper doesn't save a penalty.
More on that later.
Yeah,
indeed. I think we have been pretty open about the fact that we prefer Sky to FPL.
When it's going well.
Yeah, I suppose anything's when it's going well. But as a format, because of the fact that you can be a little bit more strategic. So where do you want to start? Do you want to talk about the differences between Sky Fantasy Football and FPL? Are we assuming that the majority of people that are coming to play Sky already play FPL, so have some understanding of...
I think that's quite likely. It's probably not going to go for everybody, but I imagine most of you probably will play FPL. This isn't going to be like a boring kind of, this is the we'll have some conversation about some points as we go, a few strategy ideas and stuff. And then, as I said, I think this time our Sky Pods will regularly be on a Wednesday, most commonly. This time next week, game we think will be open. So anything that is in this that is incorrect, we will correct right at the start of next Wednesday's podcast. Cool. The Sky Fantasy podcast themselves have tweeted out and said Friday, basically.
Nice.
So whether that's going to be price reveals or just a game launch, I'm not sure if Sky got the capability to do 3 days of shitty price reveals. I think they'll just open the game, to be totally honest.
Is FPL open yet? Nah.
No, but it might be by the time you're listening to this. It's going to be today. And to be honest, looking at them FPL prices yesterday, I'm pleased to be talking about Sky, to tell you the truth.
I haven't seen any yesterday.
Differences between Sky and FPL, I think the first one probably to say is that there's a set week. And that week runs from Friday to Thursday. I wouldn't get too hung up on the idea of game weeks. So, you know, if someone says to me in Sky, when are the double game weeks?
Doesn't exist.
Doesn't really exist. You'll have
one rolling massive 38-week game week.
As you'll learn in terms of trying to gain fixtures, because you can make transfers in the middle of a game week or a weekend, for example. Don't worry about that sort of thing. It's more about the fixture gain. The reason why we highlight Friday to Thursday as particularly important is there is a restriction on the number of transfers you can make in that Friday to Thursday period, which is set at 5. Oh my God, James, I'm not going to make 5 transfers in a week. We've had the scenario in the past where we certainly have, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
We think it's 50 transfers. Certainly that's what it was last season. It had been 40 until the last 1 or 2 years.
Just last year.
Just last year, was it?
Yeah, because of the lack of second overhaul, though. I think that's why I'm not so convinced that it will be. If it depends on how many overhauls there are.
So we think it'll probably be 50 transfers. I don't think that will change, personally. And you might have 50 transfers. That's not a lot. Well, to give you the FPL equivalent, how many transfers you get in FPL?
Well, 37, 38.
34.
You obviously discount the weeks you use the chips.
2 wild cards and a free hit. So actually, you only use 34 free transfers. You would need to take 16 minus 4 hits to get to what your availability is in Sky. So there's a little bit more scope in terms of manoeuvre transfers. So 50 is very reasonable in terms of a transfer type. Transfers can be made on any day. That's also like FPL. You can make early transfers. You can go on a Saturday night for the next weekend. You want to get them price rises. You have to worry about price rises here, though.
No.
There aren't any.
No.
Whatever the prices of a player on when the game opens, that will be their price throughout the season. So your 100 million budget never grows, if you will, which makes planning ahead in terms of, in 2 weeks, I want to make this transfer. Well, you haven't got to worry about player X is going to go up 0.2. They're not. The prices will stay the same. throughout the season. But the reason why we say transfers can be made any day is because literally they can. So
and the points count from the moment you've made the transfer, not the next game.
We'll give you an example because we've only got the weekend 1 television fixtures at the moment. And television fixtures you'll hear throughout the season are particularly important in terms of planning. But let's just say, hypothetically, on day 1, you have Erling Haaland away to Burnley and you want to sell him for Bukayo Saka on day 2 before Arsenal play Nottingham Forest at home. And yes, you can transfer a forward to a midfielder, as we'll come back onto. As long as you do it before Arsenal's game kicks off,
the first kickoff of the day.
Which they are, the 12:30 kickoff, then Saka's points will count straight away, and you obviously do still keep Haaland's points from the night before. Saka's probably a bad example because it's the 12:30 kickoff, but perhaps if I said Alexander Isak, who has Aston Villa at 5:30, then you still need to make it before the 12:30 kickoff.
Yep.
Your deadline each single day is the time of the first kickoff.
What's a deadline, James?
What's a deadline? I don't get it.
No, it's just that I miss them.
Oh.
Pretty regularly. Yeah.
I wasn't going to let the new Sky listeners know that you've got a problem there.
Well, yeah. Deadline is the time at which you're supposed to make your bloody transfers.
Basically, every time there's football fixtures in the Premier League, Suj will get a message from me in the hour before the first kickoff will be. It just
Sky
says,
reminder. Yeah, indeed.
And sometimes he still misses it. So your deadline is before first kickoff every day, to clarify.
Up to kickoff, not like 90 minutes before.
Then again,
kickoff.
similarly, if you wanted to then sell Saka for Harry Kane or Mo Salah on the Sunday, because Kane plays at Brentford, Salah plays at Chelsea. Again, it's got to be before the Tottenham game kicks off, because that's the first one, which is Brentford-Tottenham at 2:00.
Yep.
So you're always before. You can't, if you make, say if you bought Salah and the Tottenham game's already kicked off, it'll go into your team, but you won't get his points to whenever his next game is. You won't get them that day. I think that's fairly straightforward.
Yeah, pretty simple.
You mentioned overhaul.
Yes.
So what we've had previously in Sky Fantasy is 2 overhauls. Now, for the FPL listeners, overhaul essentially is a wild card, but it's forced. You get a given time that you can do it. So what's happened until last season commonly is normally been after, it's normally the first international break.
Yep.
We normally
4
have
weeks
overhaul
or what have you.
1.
Yep.
So it's short-term planning. And then the second one is normally sort of late January, early February, which might be quite difficult to fit in this year. Now, last year, what they did, because of the World Cup in the middle, they just did 1 overhaul, which was during essentially the whole period of the World Cup, return for Boxing Day. I think the 1 overhaul might stick.
Well, the 1 overhaul worked last year because they increased the transfer count from 40 to 50. So that was the compensatory thing. So if they go back to 2 overhauls, then I can see the transfer count dropping back down to 40. If they decide to keep it to 1 overhaul, then I can see the transfer count staying at 50. I know we've got this winter break, but then it's a split winter break. So does that allow it, make it any easier for them to have a bigger window for 1 overhaul?
FPL game week 21, so it's kind of nearly in the middle. It doesn't necessarily as such. You certainly have midweeks where, say, there's Carabao Cup semi-finals where there's very unlikely to be Premier League games, where, sure, it could fit in.
FA Cup?
FA Cup 4th round or 3rd round might be easier to do.
Does that tie in with the winter break, the FA Cup 3rd round?
It's just before. So the 3rd round's just before and the 4th round's just after.
So perhaps that could be the period where they do the overhaul, because you have a few weeks.
November internationals might even be another one if they want to do it a bit earlier.
So yeah, I think that's the biggest question mark really around what's going to happen, is how many overhauls, which is like we said, a wild card, change your whole team. No, there are no hits in this game. But
from a strategy point of view, in terms of when shall I wild card, you don't get a choice. And there's no chips. There's no triple captain or bench boost or any of that. Which I guess, there's no bench. That's obviously a massive difference between the 2 games. It's only 11 players. So you'll see, I'm going to guess that Haaland will probably be about 12. I think that might be the highest the player's been in Sky. I don't think it'd be much more than that. You go, oh my God, that's mad cheap. But the way it works out with the pricing of other players, you'll still find it.
You'll see £10 million defenders and
exactly
think, why is Virgil van Dijk £10.5 million? Yeah, he's worth it.
Not necessarily.
He wasn't last year, but he has been
so
previously.
much. But
I'll be honest with you, the time that I owned him in Sky, he actually came in for me. Do you remember when he scored? There was a double game week that Liverpool had, and he scored, and they kept some clean sheets as well. So there was always the potential in him. But yes, the pricing is different. As a general rule, people are more expensive.
Yes.
Yep.
And that might seem mad that Virgil van Dijk will come in at, say, only 1.5 million less than Erling Haaland, but hopefully you'll find out during this, if that's the case, it's arguably justified.
Yep.
And you'll soon find, because the cheapest players will probably be sort of 6 to 6.5,
mm-hmm.
And many of them might be absolutely useless to you, where your cheapest player possibly might even come in at sort of 7 something.
Yep.
You'll soon find that 100 million will be difficult to fit in all the players you want. I'll be honest with you, much like FPL is becoming, from a strategy perspective, Sky is very template.
Yep.
And it's okay to play that way, particularly at the start, if you're new and you're getting used to it as well. Because captaincy is extremely important in this game, because not only can you make transfers Friday, Saturday, Sunday, etc. That first weekend, you've got 4 captaincies. So you could captain Erling Haaland at Burnley on the Friday, Saka against Forest on the Saturday, Kane at Brentford on the Sunday, and Rashford at home to Wolves on the Monday. And that probably will be the template of the first 4 players, probably as well.
I think if that's not the most captained, I'd be
I think
Salah.
With the Arsenal one, there's alternatives, and yes, some will go Salah over Kane on that Sunday, for example. But unless Bruno Fernandes is much cheaper than Marcus Rashford, I think Haaland and Rashford at first Friday and Monday, which are single game days, which is something you'll hear a lot about. We call them single game days because it's only one game. So there will be a point during the season where it's like Sheffield United versus Everton, and you can have a captain in that game. And it's like, do you want to buy a player from those teams? It will be something like that. Ilman and Dyer, you'll learn to say it one day. It will be something like that. Or obviously you can skip. Certainly, when you have these single game days, you don't have to go, I have to have a player.
Of course.
Because if you don't buy the player, you're possibly saving yourself 2 transfers from your quota of 50. One for not buying the player, and another one you don't have to sell the player.
Correct.
But obviously, you'll get surges towards individual players will become quite highly owned quite quickly. And if you skip it, like if Ndiaye's in good form as an example, and then he does well, your rank will know about it. Is the point. So there's interesting strategies around that. In terms of the formations of the game, in terms of your FPL formations, it's exactly the same except one major difference, and this is the easiest way I can explain to remember this. When you play a back 5, you can only play 5-3-2. So you can't play 5-2-3. You can't play 5-4-1. If you're playing a back 5, you can only play 5-3-2. Now, this is particularly important because you can, as I mentioned with the Haaland Saka example, if we assume Saka's going to be a midfielder, that you can transfer forward for midfielder or defender for forward. At some point this season, you may well sell Erling Haaland for Virgil van Dijk, and it might feel mental.
Yep.
But there's a chance you will do it. You may then sell Virgil van Dijk for Marcus Rashford. That may well happen to you during the course of the season. But you just have to be conscious to stay around those systems. So an example would be that if you were in a 5-3-2 and you had Haaland up front and you wanted, and he got injured, you got to buy another forward.
Yes.
So you'd be prohibitive. Whereas if you're in a 4-4-2 and Haaland gets injured, you can move to 4-5-1. You can move to
5-3-2.
3-2. So 4-4-2 wouldn't work. You can't do 5-4-1. So you could buy a midfielder, but you couldn't buy a defender.
Correct. So
you have to be conscious of that. That's why a lot of people do like to sort of start around 4-4-2s.
4-4-2 is probably the most flexible. I'd be looking, if I could, to start 4-4-2. Price dependent, yeah. I'd be looking to see if I can have that flexibility.
There's no limit on the number of players you can have from one club. So, idiot here, me. After overhaul last year,
I don't think it was a stupid move. It didn't work, but it wasn't a stupid move.
Anyway, I wanted a number of Manchester City players because they had additional fixtures coming up. But Guardiola, as we know, can be a bit of a bastard to fantasy managers. Anyway, I came back from overhaul with 8 Manchester City players. It did not work out for me because of rotation and Rico Lewis suddenly playing and a few other things. You can do that. In theory, you can have... You'll see it sometimes as team of the week. It'll be like 11 Arsenal players or something where they've kept a clean sheet and all the attacking players have done well. Or that will happen with City, although it's normally difficult to put a whole 11 of City together. But you'll see dead teams like that. So there's no restriction on number of players you can have from one club. I'll be very honest with you. In most cases, unless there's an enabler who's very good at picking up tier points, you will primarily be looking at the top clubs.
Yep.
You're not going to end up with 4 Sheffield United players because they're good enablers. And so there might be one who we look at and go, yeah, that's going to be a good option, but it will be just one. If you end up with multiple players from teams, it will almost definitely be the top teams unless someone has a Leicester year, for example. In terms of captaincy, just to come back a step, the game now sets a captain for you.
Correct.
So
helpful.
It is a little bit, because one of the things obviously is this is a UK and Ireland based game. And in theory, we use theory in quotes, if you're abroad and you go on holiday during the season, you may not be able to play with your team. The game will set for you the highest priced player within your team. Yep. So if we assume Haaland's the highest priced player he's got to be, then every week it's going to automatically set Haaland for a captain. A good habit to get into, though, is because the game runs Friday to Thursday and sets on a Friday,
just
on a Friday, go in, set it, and just make sure.
Yeah, it has been known to be buggy. It's not often.
I'll be honest, last year was so much better.
Not often, but it's always better to be safe than to be sorry. Although sometimes when you get Mo Salah captain for you over Marcus Rashford because you forget to set your captains, it can work out in your favour, as I found out last season. Yep. So it was helpful, to be honest with you. But yeah, you're better off always kind of getting your captains set.
Absolutely. I mentioned template. And on that, I think that is really important from a reference of a strategy of how to play the game, and there are many different ways to play it. But even as we kind of alluded to with that Sheffield United-Everton example, if you've got a player that's really well owned and it does well, you'll notice from other fantasy games, it's going to hurt. And sometimes in Sky, you do need to make choices that are very much a shield and protect against the ownership. So it goes without saying already, but Haaland in this game is certainly going to be at a price bracket where he's probably going to be first name in for most people. If you go against that on day one, and you're more than welcome to, you know what the potential damage is. Yep. Goes without saying. And I think the Rashford one is another one, unless Lisandro Martinez, perhaps because the ability to pick up passing bonus, which we'll speak about in a second, or as I said, if Bruno Fernandes is much cheaper, or if United bought another forward, Rashford on that Monday is going to be hugely popular as well. On the Sundays, you said you'll get a bit more of a Kane-Salah split. Yep. And on the Saturday, you might get more of a split between Arsenal players, perhaps even Brighton players, because they've got Luton at home. There'll be more of a split. But those way, the less games you've got, the less choice you've got. Stands to reason, right? And those are ones that you need to be very cautious of from a captaincy perspective. Don't be scared of template. It might sound boring, but particularly to start with, be very aware of ownership numbers. You know, so from an FPL comparison, team selected by ownership is the entire game. We know there's a lot of bots in FPL as well. Here we get given 2 numbers in terms of team selected by. So you've got the overall ownership and you've got the top 1,000 ownership. The top 1,000 is generally regarded as like top 10K, let's say in FPL or something like that. The thing is, in the early days of this game, you get a lot of people blowing a lot of transfers just to get up the leaderboard right at the beginning. People will use their 50 before Christmas. So when you start looking at the ownership numbers, are you of the mindset that for the first, let's just say up to Christmas or so, ignore the top 1K and look at the overall ownership? No. Or do you try and balance it between the two of them? It's very dependent, because we've had years where the template will do very well and there'll be years where the template does badly, right? So if we hit mid-September and we're looking at the top 10 or even top 100 and all the names in there are familiar already that early, then template is banged and we probably need to look at that top 1,000 ownership a lot more. If at the start of the season you've got some wild differentials are doing great, and you're looking at experienced players and they're still languishing about sort of 10,000 at sort of October, November, just hypothetically, then we probably don't maybe need to look at it quite so soon. So I think we judge that as it goes. There's not a set point. I'd go, this is the point where we start looking at the top 1,000. And you should be conscious when you look at ownership at the start, you should be conscious that there are certain players who will just get picked because they are popular and people who know who they are. You know, a Haaland, a Salah is going to be well picked irrespective. For example, a lot of the English players will be picked well irrespective. You know, Harry Kane, if he stays at Tottenham, will be well selected, for example. And there'll be other examples of that where people just want to go and set a team up and they'll pick players that they know, right, rather than doing the research. A certain number of players will just get naturally well owned. Like a Kane, even if his price was like the same as Haaland, he's still going to come in with good ownership, as an example. Tortoise versus De Gea is an expression you'll hear during the course of the season, and that will refer to those who go slow or those who go fast. And generally, people will find a way to use all 50 transfers before Christmas, and we don't need to worry about these people.
No,
because they're not going to win the game.
Yeah, overall rank, it doesn't really come into play until after Christmas at all, does it really?
If you think about it just logically,
obviously the higher you are, the better, but you don't read too much into it.
If you used one transfer per match week, in theory, you should land with 12 or 13 left on the final day, right? Mm-hmm. Now, that won't be the case because you'll be looking for gains and stuff. But I think when we broke for the World Cup, so sort of November, so that was sort of 16 match weeks. Paul, who won it last year, had mid to high 30s left.
I had 42.
Yeah.
And I was doing quite well.
I had 29 left.
Yeah.
So I'd used more than I'd wanted to. But generally, those who go a bit slower, you got to remember as well, the longer the season goes on, the more information we've got.
Correct.
Players are buying new players, different managers, new systems, etc.
Yeah, and I think even like who are the mid or lower tier players that are tier pointing, like that pop up that we might not have thought about, like Paulinho really, where he delivered what we thought he might, but then Kamara and a few other cheaper players, Caicedo.
Fixture gains is extremely important in Sky. So I'll run you through an example. So let's say in week 1, Manchester United play Wolves on the Monday. Let's say hypothetically, and we don't know this at the moment, but let's say Tottenham and Manchester United is the 5:30 game on the Saturday in match week 2, and Manchester City and Newcastle is on the Sunday. Let's use that as an example. And it's a bad example because it's start of the season. You probably don't want to be making transfers that early necessarily. But again, you could have Haaland on the Friday.
Yep.
Buy Rashford on the Monday. Then you've got him for the Tottenham fixture as well. And then you could go back to Haaland for the Sunday game against Newcastle. Or if you go forward another week and Rashford's playing the Saturday again and Haaland's playing the Sunday, then you could say, well, I'm going to skip Haaland against Newcastle. I'm going to have Haaland for 1 game. Then I have Rashford for 3. I lose Haaland for 1 and then go back to Haaland.
And if you've got plans to captain Rashford, it makes it even more worthwhile.
Of course, absolutely. And you don't have to go back, obviously. Yeah. That's a personal choice. But this is what a lot of people look for with fixture gains, for example. The reason I went for 8 Manchester City players when I did is because they had extra fixtures over that period. Simple as that. Of course, rotation doesn't mean that Manchester City players do, but there are certain players. Rashford is normally a good example. Virgil van Dijk. These guys are they're gonna if they stay fit all season, they start 35, 36 games, don't they? Right? Might even be 38 in some cases. These guys are reliable. You will get the gains. Well, Harry Kane is probably the best example, actually, if he stays with Tottenham, where he's nearly always going to play, isn't he? You know, when you buy a Kane, you're almost definitely getting that fixture game. And realistically, in this format of game, you should be making transfers when there are gains. Mm-hmm. That is exactly what you should be doing. First week is probably not the one for long-term decisions because you're only gaining 1 fixture. The idea to do it is when you've gained off a couple and then you're going to gain a couple. And once we've got the TV fixtures, we can look and highlight and say, this is a good period for this player. This is a good period for this player. But you don't want to be making transfers on a Wednesday unless there's fixtures on a Wednesday. There's no point. There's literally no point. So if Haaland was against Newcastle on the 2nd Sunday, right, why are you buying him on the Wednesday when you've got that extra Rashford fixture on the Saturday? Wait till the Sunday morning. Mm-hmm. And if you don't want to wait till the Sunday morning, fine. Or at least wait till Rashford's game on the Saturday is gone.
Finished.
Right? Yeah. That's fine. But generally speaking, I would say 95% of Sky transfers will be made in the hour before a deadline from engaged players. Yep. And not everybody can do it, right? We know that people have got jobs, lives, work, weekends, etc. But but most people will wait for that first team. A good example where you might not want to is, say you want to buy Haaland on a Sunday and Sheffield United Newcastle is the early kickoff. Did I say Newcastle?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I should have said Everton. Sorry, Toon fans. Sheffield United Everton's the early kickoff, and you think, well, that's irrelevant to me. Okay, you could buy Haaland late on the Saturday night if you want.
Yeah,
that's a good example of, okay, it's fine. But most people will make their transfers in the hour before. Some people will wait till the warm-ups are done, in case my player gets injured in the warm-up. It will happen once a season to someone, unfortunately. And it does go the other way. Those who are obviously FPL players are familiar with having to go an hour and a half before deadline. Sky players are not. A great example from a couple of years ago was Mo Salah was he was a sub at Palace. And obviously we all know it. So we moved the captaincy to another Liverpool player. Salah comes on with half hour to go, scores twice, goes mental. And we've all moved the captaincy, but we've all done the right thing. Now, most of the time, obviously, it will work in your favour and it doesn't go that way. But fixture gains are really, really important. And we will do all the detail in terms of schedule once we've got more, and we can expect it soon. In terms of announcements, Suj, what's different this year is the Premier League at the moment are only committing to 6 weeks' notice.
Right.
Rather than the September fixtures will be announced on this date. They're committing to 6 weeks' notice, so it might be we only get 1 week at a time, rolling, which I think is probably unlikely.
Because
I'm sure Sky will want to go.
Start promoting the whole month of fixtures.
We've got the Merseyside derby and the North London derby in September or whatever.
They always kind of promote by showing what they've got for the whole month coming up, don't they?
Correct. So that's probably, but at the moment the commitment's only 6 weeks. So what are we now, the 5th of July?
Yep.
The season kicks off on
12th
11th
of
August, a Friday. So the following weekend is like the 18th of August. So, I mean, are they already failing week 2? So it literally could even be today.
Yeah,
it really should be any time for the weekend of match week 2. Hopefully we should have at least that for next week. And then you can start really then mapping out the 2s, 3 for 1s. There's certain things to be aware of in the sense of Liverpool is a great example this year. Liverpool are going to have a lot of Sunday games because they're in Europa League. So someone like Sally, if I don't want at the start, but once you hit September and he's playing every Sunday.
Captaincy every other Sunday.
That solves you a lot of your captaincy for covering the Sunday, and there probably will be a lot of that this year where it's Haaland Saturday, Salah Sunday. There probably will be quite a lot of that, particularly in sort of a September, October period, Suj. You mentioned, Suj, about a few players like Van Dijk, we've mentioned, Paulinho, players who probably won't be familiar to Sky players, and it says they're good fantasy assets.
FPL players, but yeah, I think even like if you'd said to me, who was your favourite Man City asset last season?
Rodri.
I'm going to tell you Rodri all day long because he never went over 8-9% ownership and just smashed it all the time. So many more players are of interest in Sky than they are in FPL, and that is basically down to the point scoring and how they can score and score points in different ways and tier points as well. So I think it's worth going through the points to shed light on why some of these assets are so good.
Just an interesting one. You want to do a bit of trivia, Suj, because you don't know the answer to this.
Always. 12
players scored 200 or more points in Sky last year. Go.
Saka.
Yep.
Martinelli.
Yep.
Haaland.
No.
Kane.
Yes.
That's 4, right?
In your own time.
Salah.
Yes.
Trippier.
No.
Oh, okay. First wrong. I've got 3 more to get. Raya.
Yep.
Okay.
You got more than 3, mate.
No, 2. You said 8 players.
12. I said.
Oh, 12 players.
You were hoping it's 8.
Oh shit. Okay. Trent.
No. I'm going to jump in. The 2 outfield players you're missing are Marcus Rashford and Martin Odegaard. The others are goalkeepers. Ramsdale, Pope, Raya, Alisson, De Gea.
I said Raya.
I know you did. Yeah. 5 goalkeepers over 200 points.
Yep.
Goalkeepers be quite important. Suj referenced the Sheffield United Everton example. Sorry to those teams again. That if it's a single game day, go and get Sean Dyche. Sky players will tell you having Nick Pope in the past has been good. It's been bad on occasions as well. But yeah, go and get Jordan Pickford for a few games. Everton have decent fixtures for a while this season. But in terms of the actual tiering points, to take you through how that works. So this is basically Sky's version of the FPL BPS system. And you'll like this because although FPL bonus system is black and white, even though a lot of people think it isn't, Sky's really is black and white.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, they changed it the day after. It's not so black and white.
But
that happens rarely.
A lot of that is down to Opta changing the number of completed passes, for example.
Yeah.
So there are 4 ways you can earn bonus points in this game. And those are through saves, obviously, for goalkeepers. They're through tackles, they're through completed passes, and they're through shots on target. I should clarify, tackles are tackles that are deemed as successful. And what that means is that the ball goes either safe or to a teammate. So if you see someone make a sliding tackle and win the ball and it still goes straight to an opponent, that won't count. If it goes safe out of play or to a teammate, it will count. It was an example I gave on this podcast 3 years ago of getting my knickers in a twist after Cagliostro looked like he'd made tackle tier after about a minute in a game against Southampton. He won 3 tackles in a row. But every time he won the ball, it went to an opposition player. None of them counted. Literally went in for 3 crunching tackles, won the lot, and none of them counted because they all ended up going to an opposition player where he had to go and win the next one. How you earn these points. So 3 saves for a goalkeeper will earn 2 bonus points. If you get 5, then that's 3. For tackles,
usually we kind of refer to it as tier 1, tier 2, right? So for all of the different shots, passes, tackles, and saves, you got tier 1, 2 points, tier 2, 3 points.
That's probably a better way of explaining it. Thank you, Suj.
Yeah. So 2 points being tier 1. 3 saves.
Correct.
Reasonably
5 saves for tier 2. So FPL's currently it's rolling 3, isn't it? This is 3 and then 2. It doesn't jump any higher, by the way. So if you had David Raya for that game against Brighton, where he made, I don't know, 11 saves or something.
It's only 3. It's not 3 for every 5.
It doesn't matter how many he gets beyond that. Similarly, for tier 1 in tackles, it's 4 completed. It's only 1 more to hit tier 2, so it's 5 or more. For completed passes, and this is the easiest one to get a grip of, essentially, in terms of earning bonus points, 60 completed passes will hit you tier 1, 70 or more will hit you tier 2. And for shots on target, 2 shots on target will hit tier 1, 3 shots on target will hit tier 2. Clarify, shots on target, I don't think include shots that are cleared off the line, unfortunately.
Right.
It has to be saved by a goalkeeper, essentially. That's how Opta deem it for whatever reason. And a lot of this, Sky will obviously take the data, outsource it from somewhere else. So if you're blaming them, it's often blame the guys who put in the models and the statistics together, actually. So players who are good at tiering, you'd mentioned David Raya as a really good example. He hit save tier 2 16 times last season. So Burnt Leno,
nearly half his games.
Burnt Leno 14 times. Yep, he's also hit save tier 1 a few times, obviously.
Yeah.
David Raya as well.
It's where when they hit a clean sheet and pick up tier points and what have you, a goalkeeper, you're looking at like 12, 13 points. So decent.
David Raya had 16 times tier 2 last season, 13 times tier 1. So it's 29 games out of 38. He's in save tier.
Yeah. First half of the season up until the World Cup, he was so good to have. Comfort blanket. Yep. I got rid of him because of these bloody fixture games, and after that it really hurt. I ended up with Nick Pope for quite a lot, but I miss David Raya. Like if he stayed at Brentford, the nostalgia factor.
It can go either way with the keepers because I mean, as we've just shown there, Raya was obviously the top 12 top scorers in the game last year. But so's Alisson, so's De Gea, so's Ramsdale, so's Pope.
I'll tell you, who's not Edison, and Edison. He hurt a lot of people. Did Edison?
Yeah, hi. Edison hurt nearly everybody, I think, to be honest. Because while I went mad for Man City players, most went, well, at least Edison will play. Yeah, but can he kick the ball out of net? It's getting the right keeper is important, but it's also worth saying they're one I like to transfer during the season. The Pickford example that we've given you, where that, trust me, it might sound ridiculous, but because they get 7 points for clean sheet goalkeepers, and we'll come on to the other scoring in a second, goalkeepers feel like the one, if you just want to dip it in and dip it out and move it on, you can haul quite quickly there. If you've got a Raya, they get 7 for a clean sheet, defenders are 5. But if you've got Raya as a single game day and you get him in for a transfer and you captain him and he keeps a clean sheet and it's saved tier 2, it's 20 points. And that's when we say, well, if you skip one, potential 20-point difference, and there'll be madder ones for higher profile outfield players, obviously.
Yep.
James Maddison was one you missed last year, despite doing really well on the Monday night against Forest. It was 36 points captaincy or something, I think. And it's just
big.
Yeah, exactly that. Tackles. João Paulini is a name that Suj has already mentioned. Extremely popular last year. Hit tier 2 tackles on 14 occasions and tier 1 6 occasions as well. So half the time, it felt like there was a period before the World Cup, it just felt like guaranteed every game.
Yeah, the end of the season, he really dipped off, I think, when he was close to bans and stuff. But first half of the season,
worth saying 14 yellow cards.
Yeah.
But somebody normally emerges like that who becomes an enabler. So I've already mentioned that your cheapest player in Sky this year might be 7-ish or high 6s. Paulinho was, 6.6?
Yeah, something like that.
I think he was one of the shrewdies that I identified in pre-season. So this year, someone like Josh Cullen at Burnley might be an alternative, just as a name to throw out there. I've not done a huge amount of research yet on the promoted teams. But if you can find a good tackler, and they're picking these tackles up every week, like Paulinho was, and he's 4 or 5 points every week, and he's essentially the equivalent of a 4.5 midfielder in FPL who's getting you 4 or 5 points every week, you want him. Right?
Caicedo was another good one, but he's not going to be cheap anymore. Not in real life and not in a fantasy game, I think. So he was one that dipped away. Yeah.
Yeah, others that were good for tackles, probably holding midfielders primarily rather than, say, a centre-back. So Tyler Adams at Leeds, who may well even get a move back to the Premier League, Casemiro, Idrissa Gueye, Everton, Caicedo, you mentioned, Suj, Pascal Struijk was one at Leeds. Sometimes fullbacks can be really good. We've had it historically with like Aaron Wan-Bissaka.
Yeah.
And I think as soon as I said it, people, I can visualise that with Wan-Bissaka winning tackles. Fullbacks can be. You'll find one or two. Nico Williams really early last season.
Yeah.
Was an enabler at Forest.
I wanted him for attacking returns, not for tackle tiers, but he did pick a few up.
Who all of us wouldn't have gone and bought. But in the weeks prior to that point where they had, I think Forest had 2 consecutive Mondays from memory, the Leicester game and Aston Villa, where it seemed worthwhile with at least 1 and possibly 2 captaincies to go and get him in as a very cheap player, as an example. And your real cheapy one you're looking for during the course as an enabler probably is going to be someone who's a ball winner. That's something to bear in mind. In terms of passes, Suj has mentioned Rodri 25 times last season. Rodri
tier 2
here 2 passing.
Ridiculous.
To be honest, didn't hit tier 1 once. He didn't hit tier 1 often.
But that's because he gets taken off otherwise.
No, it's because he's normally in like 80, 90, 100, isn't
true.
it?
The guy's a passing machine.
Only one other player hit tier 2 more than 20 times last season, Suj, do you know?
Lewis Dunk.
It is. Lewis Dunk of Brighton is an absolutely super asset in this game.
Yep.
At any point that Brighton are doing well.
He's never had a crazy price. 8 million last year, was he?
And because he's a Brighton and Hove Albion player rather than a Liverpool player, I don't suppose he'll have a crazy price this year as well. And it was probably one where you look at the start of the season, you go, I want Rashford, I want Saka, I want Son or whatever. And you probably overlook him again, you know that.
Yeah.
Their fixtures are good at the start. Be very conscious of him, because even more so now under De Zerbi than under Potter, even in some of the big games, he can hit passing tier.
Yep, he's captainable. It's
He
a clean
really
sheet
is.
and a tier 2. 10 points comfortably.
There will be people who will captain him on that first Saturday against Luton. Definitely. And that for an FPL manager, I can totally get it. Be like, that is ridiculous.
But you feel like
literally just think about it and go, the passing is almost guaranteed.
Yeah, that's 5 points
fixture.
he's starting on.
So you're starting on 5 with the 2 appearance points. If the clean sheet comes with it, that's another 5. You're on 10. If you get the goal from the set piece as well, you're looking at, was it 7 for a defender, isn't it, for a goal? It's looking at 17 times 2. And I know it's the holy, and you can say, I could do that with an FPL player and it's 15. Yeah, but the passing bit offers you more of a guarantee.
Yeah. And
really does.
The likelihood of him being captain in FPL is 0, whereas in Sky, versus other players, you can make real gains. The captaincy does drive the gains a lot more.
Others that show up well for passing, Virgil van Dijk, Ruben Diaz
Always.
at Kanji, Manchester City
Centre-backs.
is standard. Virgil van Dijk. Trent was coming back in towards the end of the season, and obviously with his new position is certainly worth keeping an eye on. Another player who he actually showed up, Suj, it was only 6 players had hit passing tier 2 more than him last season. Enzo Fernandez.
Yep.
He came in January. into a bad team. So Enzo Fernandez is one really to keep an eye on because he can hit the tackles as well. You've got a combination of a ball player and a ball winner, if you will, although it's new manager, so system, etc. might be a little different.
Particularly cheap as well, 7 point something, wasn't he? I feel like it was 7.4, maybe 7.5. It wasn't expensive.
No, it was cheap.
Yeah.
There'll be a high.
I don't think he'll be that cheap.
But I don't think it'll be a massive. And if arguably on paper to start with, he'd be the go-to Chelsea, maybe.
See, Rodri, for example, was 9.4, 9.5, something like that. And you've got Kevin De Bruyne at 11s. So if Enzo...
Rodri was 9.1.
Was 9.1?
Do you know what? I bet you it's
low
not,
nines.
I bet you it's not much more.
Yeah.
Purely because, and this is the interesting thing.
So how much cheaper could Fernandes be than Rodri?
What's the major difference between Enzo Fernandez and Rodri?
Or City. It's just a better team.
Well, that's one, but Enzo Fernandez, you might stick the armband on.
True.
So when you've got Chelsea on a Monday night, a single game day, I'll captain Enzo Fernandez. If he gets me past and tier 5 times 2, that's 10, we'll move on. You're not doing that with Rodri.
Never.
Because you've got the Norwegian up front.
It's always there.
Whose ceiling is just a lot higher, basically. Yeah. There are certain games where if you don't fancy Haaland to return, you think, well, Rodri's nailed on for passing, you could do it, but it ain't going to be often. So what I'm saying is, this is a great example. If Rodri and Enzo Fernandez were to come in at the same price, arguably, although Rodri is an even bigger comfort blanket, the fact that Enzo Fernandez gives you that alternative option would maybe make him the better pick, as an example. But that's why I think, like, if you're thinking Rodri's going to jump up to 10-5 or something, I don't see it. Because you're not going to captain him.
Yep.
So, but they're the ones primarily. So good teams who play out from the back. William Saliba was very good as a very cheap option last year. I'm sure he won't be this year. I think to throw a name out there, subject to what I've seen from Tottenham in pre-season, Bissouma might be one that comes right back to the front this year. If he ends up being the 6 that sits in front of the back 4, and if Tottenham are going to become a football team again, because he's that Fernandes combination, ball player and ball winner. Might be an interesting one. And he's not going to be a big price. That's why I highlight him as. There'll be other players from other teams you can certainly keep an eye on. In terms of shot tiers, nobody hit shot tier 2 double figures last year, and only 2 players hit shot tier 2 more than 5 times. One is obvious.
Yeah, because he scored that many hat-tricks, probably, Erling Haaland.
The other one is not.
Shot tier 2.
So Erling Haaland hit it 9 times.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the full 3 bonus. The other player is Ollie Watkins. Hit it 8 times.
Okay.
A really good spell with Villa, didn't he?
The second half of the season was amazing.
It was one of the best signings for me in what was a bad season, but then there's a cluster. So Kane only hit it 5 times, for example. We assess Kane with shot volume quite a lot over historicals. What I would say is Kane's volume, should he stay at Tottenham, might go back up this year. And I'd bear that in mind. In terms of shot tier 1 to 2 shots on target, Kane hit that 16 times. Rashford 14, Haaland only a 9. So very interesting. Haaland only hit shot tier 18 times. We'd expect that to almost be every week, wouldn't he? But how many times?
He scores.
He's only touched the ball once. He's scored.
That's true. It's usually the X touch, isn't it? 10 touches, 1 goal. So yeah,
the easiest ones to find here is the passing ones.
Correct.
That's why that's the most important. You will get much more variance from those shot tiers and those tackle tiers. Like Paulinho, outstanding in the first half of the season, not so much in the second. Ollie Watkins.
Tackles is frustrating as well. You'll see somebody get to like 3 tackles in the first 10 minutes,
and they'll stay.
And then they'll stay at 3 tackles for the remainder of the game. Whereas the passes is just continuously going up and up and up and up.
Talking of recommendations, if we're doing an intro to Sky Players, ffstuff.co.uk is a really top website for Sky managers where you can keep a track through the match centre on there in terms of the increases of passing numbers and tackles and shots on target for players. Once you get on it, once Sky starts, you won't get off it. That's a top website to use for reference. In terms of general scoring for Sky, a couple of differences that people might have already picked up. Appearance points, it's 2 points for the start. Doesn't matter if they get taken off after 30 seconds, you'll get your 2 points. So none of this 59 minutes sweat or anything like that. Although that does still exist on clean sheets. So, and with clean sheets in Sky, you need to get the full game. You only have to play the 60 minutes, but you'll only get the points if the
whole
clean
team
sheet
keeps the clean sheet.
Remains and keeps the clean sheet. Goals for goalkeepers scoring this year. Vicario scoring. Defenders, he's 6 points in FPL. It's seven in Sky. 6 points for midfielder goal in Sky is big. So if you consider that, let's say Rashford's the midfielder, we use it as it'll probably be a popular example on that first Monday night. You get the appearance, you get the goal, even if he just has the one shot on target, that's your 8 point times 2. That's locked in. Whereas with FPL, you need the clean sheet point to go with it. Obviously, he only needs one more shot on target, and that's your 10 times 2. So these can become... Sky is a more powerful game from that perspective. Goals for forwards are worth 5 points rather than 4. Clean sheets, I said, for goalkeepers, 7 points. For defenders, they're 5. Midfielders don't get the 1 point, 60 minutes.
Cheeky little bonus.
Anything like that. Penalty saves are the same at 5 points. A penalty miss in Sky is -3 rather than -2. I put an asterisk in my note on penalty saves because it's a big bugbearer of mine, and I don't know if it'll get changed or not. But essentially, if you own a goalkeeper, your goalkeeper doesn't have to save the penalty for you to get the 5 points, i.e. if you have Jordan Pickford and he's facing Erling Haaland, if Erling Haaland smashes it off the crossbar, Pickford will get 5 points.
Fair play. Maybe it was like he was pulling faces, put the striker off.
Really, if he saves it, he saves it. I really dislike it. It just brings a random element that I don't think the game needs.
Hello, Nick Pope.
Nick Pope, you had for it. And I've benefited from it. I remember I had Dean Henderson one year. I had it. We've all benefited from it at some stage, but don't like it.
It is a bit random. Yeah. Agreed.
It's 5 as well. It's not like 3. 5.
Yellow cards is a -1. Reds are -3 as well, aren't they?
Reds -2.
-2.
But they're the same. The only ones I highlight there are difference in scoring from FPL. Otherwise, it's the same. So from the scoring perspective, the easiest way to get your head around it, in all seriousness, is extra point for a goal.
Yep.
And your tiering system is your replacement for your bonus point system. That's it. So
cool.
That's the easiest way to get your head around the scoring.
The other useful thing, and it's a shameless plug for patreon.com/planetfpl, but is another really useful tool is the spreadsheet, James. One of the things we talked about was fixture gains. I know the thing that helps me the most with Sky
is the skills.
Is the skills spreadsheet where all the fixtures are laid out, which James has created. And I can see the gap. I'm sure other versions are available. I don't know. I just use yours.
There are others, like our friendly apparent and FF stuff.
Yeah, I can see the gaps between the fixtures and which teams have runs and what have you. Like without that, I wouldn't be able to play Sky. I don't have the patience to it. With the spreadsheet, I can make plans and look 4 weeks out and 5 weeks out and that kind of thing.
I think the biggest thing of all, though, for new Sky managers is to tell you honestly that you can win it.
Yeah. Because that's the one big difference between FPL and Sky.
You can win it.
50,000, Nico. 50,000 dineros.
Someone we know might win FPL, but the chances are within the Sky community, someone will know the winner.
Well, we know last year's.
Well,
he was
Paul
on the
McAnulty
show.
sat here on the last Sky Fantasy podcast
about a month ago.
that we did, and congratulations to Paul
Indeed.
from the 3-for-1 pod, and the Hub guys do a great podcast, and there's others as well. We're not the only Sky Fantasy podcast around.
No.
Everyone gets on very well. There's loads of tools. Just use the SkyFF hashtag on Twitter as an example, and you'll find plenty of content. And as the game grows, so will the content creation. There's lots of good Sky content out there, both written, podcast, video. There's some good stuff out there. We'll be every Wednesday. Yep.
Anyway, while I was talking about that spreadsheet, it's available on Patreon. So head over to patreon.com/planetfpl and
but you'll
find it on Slack.
You can
win
£3 a month. Sky. There has been a first-time winner of Sky in the past.
Yes.
It can happen. So hit the ground running. it's a lot to get your head around, but there's plenty of time to do it. And next week we'll look at pricing. I got Luke Williams is going to be joining me on the Sky podcast, extremely good and experienced Sky player as well. And we'll talk about some further tips on that podcast in a couple of weeks as well, and dive a bit more into the pricing and strategy and whatnot. So plenty of time between now and the start of the season to begin to get your head around it. But this should be an intro that in theory you can refer back to as the season comes around. When Lewis Dunk drops at 11 million on Friday, there's like shit, am I really going to have him? Probably not.
No.
Lewis Dunk drops at like 8 million again. It's like...
Shoe in.
Goes in before Haaland.
Locked.
Honestly, in a weird way.
Cool. Sounds good. Oh, we'll get 2 teams as well in Sky. So you can play 2 teams at the same time.
Yeah, we talk about it more next week.
Yes, indeed.
I've seen something which it's better because this is an intro that I think people should listen back to. We'll talk about it next week. It might be that people are going to be doing something very different with their second teams. Cool.
Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. We're back at you tomorrow. What are we doing tomorrow?
Clayton will be joining me for the transfer show that we're going to do throughout July.
Nice. Let's see how he feels about his club dropping the biggest transfer fee ever. Stay safe. Look after yourselves. Ciao for now.
I love you acting like Neymar doesn't exist. Be nice to each other, everyone.
English transfer fee.
Okay, congratulations. Your star is gone. Cue music, please, man-child.